The Japanese automotive industry has given the world some of the most iconic and celebrated sports cars in history, machines that have achieved legendary status and commanded cult followings that span generations. But for every Nissan Skyline GTR that gets all the attention, for every Toyota Supra that sells for six figures at auction, and for every Mazda RX-7 that gets featured in movies and video games, there are dozens of genuinely exceptional Japanese sports cars that get completely overlooked, ignored, and underappreciated by the mainstream automotive community. These are the cars that offered incredible performance, engaging driving dynamics, and that special JDM character that enthusiasts crave. But for whatever reason, whether it was bad timing, poor marketing, or simply being overshadowed by more famous siblings, they never received the recognition they truly deserve. Today we're going to shine a spotlight on the most underrated JDM sports cars ever created, machines that deliver everything enthusiasts want but somehow remain affordable accessible, and flying completely under the radar while everyone else chases overpriced legends. Let's start with what might be the single most underrated sports car to ever come out of Japan, the Nissan Silvia S15. Now I know what you're thinking, the Silvia is famous in drift culture and tuning communities, so how can it be underrated? Here's the thing, while earlier S14 and S42 chassis get some attention, the final S15 generation that ran from 1999 to 2002 remains criminally undervalued compared to its capabilities and significance. The S15 represented the absolute pinnacle of Nissan's SR-powered rear-wheel drive sports car evolution, featuring the most refined SR20D turbocharged 2.0-liter four-cylinder engine ever produced with variable valve timing that gave it both low-end torque and high RPM power, a chassis that was stiffer and better balanced than any previous Silvia, revised suspension geometry that improved handling characteristics dramatically, and styling that has aged incredibly well with its aggressive front end and purposeful proportions. The Spec R variant came with a proper 6-speed manual transmission, a helical limited slip differential, and Brembo brakes, creating a package that could legitimately compete with cars costing twice as much. What makes the S15 so underrated is that it never came to major markets like the United States, which means most Western enthusiasts have never experienced one firsthand, and even in regions where it was sold, it's overshadowed by the Skyline GTR hype. But anyone who's actually driven a well-sorted S15 knows it delivers one of the most engaging and communicative driving experiences in the JDM world, with perfect weight distribution, direct steering, and an engine that responds instantly to throttle inputs. These cars remain relatively affordable compared to Supras and Skylines, yet they offer 90% of the driving enjoyment for a fraction of the cost. Another massively underrated gem is the Mazda RX-8. And yes, I'm fully aware of the rotary engine reliability concerns, but hear me out. The RX-8 gets unfairly dismissed because of the Wankel engine's maintenance requirements and the shadow cast by its legendary predecessor, the RX-7, but this car deserves far more credit than it receives. What the RX-8 offered was genuinely unique in the automotive world. A naturally aspirated rotary engine that revved to 9,000 RPM and delivered power in a completely linear, predictable manner unlike any piston engine, a chassis with near-perfect 50-50 weight distribution that made it handle like it was on rails through corners, genuinely usable rear seats accessed through clever suicide doors that made it more practical than any other sports car in its class, and all of this at a price point that was incredibly accessible when new and remains affordable today. The problem is that people got hung up on the rotary's quirks. The fact that you needed to check and add oil regularly, that carbon buildup could be an issue if you didn't drive the car hard occasionally, and that the engine might need rebuilding at higher mileage. But here's what they missed. If you understand how to maintain a rotary properly, and you actually enjoy driving enthusiastically, the RX-8 delivers an experience that nothing else can match at anywhere near its price point. The steering is telepathic, the chassis balance is extraordinary, and that high, revving rotary soundtrack is addictive in a way that four-cylinder and V6 engines simply cannot replicate. Professional drivers and journalists who've spent serious time with the RX-8 consistently praise its handling dynamics as being among the best of any affordable sports car. Yet the general public continues to overlook it entirely because they're scared of the rotary maintenance reality. Moving to something completely different, let's talk about the Toyota MR2 Spyder, also known as the MRS or third generation and MR2. This car gets absolutely no respect, and it's genuinely baffling when you consider what it offers. The MR2 Spyder took everything great about the previous turbocharged SW20 MR2 and distilled it down to its pure essence: mid-engine layout for perfect balance and exotic handling characteristics, lightweight construction with a curb weight under 300 pounds, a high, revving naturally aspirated 1.8-liter four-cylinder engine that produced 140 horsepower, which doesn't sound impressive until you factor in the featherweight chassis, a manual transmission with perfectly spaced gears, and convertible top for open-air driving enjoyment. What made the MR2 Spyder special was its focus on the driving experience over raw performance numbers. This wasn't a car you bought to win drag races or post impressive lap times, though it could certainly hold its own on a road course. This was a car you bought because you wanted to feel connected to the road, to experience the magic of mid-engine balance, to enjoy a perfectly weighted steering rack and a chassis that communicated everything happening at the contact patches. The problem was that when it launched in 2000, people were disappointed it didn't have a turbo like the previous generation. They complained about the relatively modest power output, and they didn't appreciate the back-to-basics philosophy that prioritized engagement over outright speed. Today, you can find these cars for incredibly affordable prices, far less than a comparable Mazda Miata in many cases, yet they offer mid-engine handling that the Miata simply cannot match. The aftermarket is strong with numerous turbo kits and engine swap options for those who want more power, but even in stock form, the MR2 Spyder delivers driving joy that few modern cars can equal. Here's one that almost nobody talks about anymore: the Subaru SVX. This car was genuinely ahead of its time when it launched in the early 90s, featuring dramatic styling penned by legendary Italian design house Giugiaro with distinctive within a window glass design that made it instantly recognizable. A powerful 3.3-liter flat-six engine producing over 230 horsepower, Subaru's symmetrical all-wheel drive system providing confidence in all weather conditions, and a level of refinement and comfort that made it a legitimate grand touring car rather than a raw sports car. The SVX was Subaru's attempt to move upmarket and create a Japanese competitor to European grand tourers, and in many ways, they succeeded brilliantly. The problem was timing and market positioning. The SVX launched during an economic recession when luxury sport coupes were a tough sell. It was only available with an automatic transmission in most markets, which turned off enthusiasts who wanted manuals, and Subaru's brand image at the time was economy cars and quirky wagons, not sophisticated grand tourers. The SVX was expensive when new and didn't sell well, leading to its discontinuation after just 6 years. Today, these cars have depreciated to bargain basement prices despite offering genuine performance, all-weather capability, and striking looks that still turn heads. The flat-six engine is smooth and powerful, the all-wheel drive system is confidence-inspiring, and the interior is comfortable and well-appointed. For anyone looking for a practical sports car that can serve as a daily driver year-round while still providing genuine driving enjoyment, the SVX represents incredible value that almost nobody recognizes. Let's not forget the Mitsubishi GTO, known in some markets as the 3000 GT. While the VR4 variant with all-wheel drive and twin turbos gets some recognition among hardcore enthusiasts, the entire GTO lineup remains massively underrated considering the technology and performance it offered. These cars were absolutely packed with cutting-edge features when they launched in 1990. Active aerodynamics with computer-controlled spoilers that adjusted based on speed, electronically controlled suspension that could adapt to different driving conditions, wheel steering that improved both low-speed maneuverability and high-speed stability, all-wheel drive with active torque distribution, and a twin-turbocharged V6 engine producing 300 horsepower. This was legitimate supercar technology wrapped in a grand touring body, competing directly against the Nissan 300ZX and Toyota Supra while actually exceeding both in terms of technological sophistication. The problem was that all this technology made the GTO complex and somewhat heavy, and the car developed a reputation for being expensive to maintain when things went wrong. But here's the reality. A well-maintained GTO is an absolute monster that delivers performance and capabilities that seem impossible for its current market value. You can find clean examples for under $15,000, sometimes even less, and what you get is a twin-turbo all-wheel drive sports car with exotic looks and genuine supercar acceleration. The styling has aged remarkably well, looking aggressive and purposeful even today, and the driving experience when everything is working properly is genuinely special. The GTO represents the peak of Japan's bubble economy excess when engineers were told to create the best possible car regardless of complexity or cost, and the result is a machine that deserves far more appreciation than it receives. Another criminally underrated option is the Mazda MX-6, particularly the second generation with the turbocharged engine. Most people have never even heard of the MX-6, which is exactly why it's so underrated. This front-wheel drive sport coupe shared its platform with the Ford Probe, but was tuned and executed far better by Mazda's engineers. The turbocharged 2.5-liter V6 produced around 164 horsepower, which might not sound impressive today, but in a relatively lightweight coupe with sport-tuned suspension and excellent build quality, it created a surprisingly engaging driving experience. The MX-6 offered distinctive coupe styling that stood out from the generic sport compacts of its era, a well-appointed interior with excellent ergonomics, Mazda's legendary attention to detail and build quality, and a price point that made it accessible to enthusiasts on a budget. Today, these cars are almost completely forgotten, selling for absolute pennies compared to more famous Japanese sports coupes, yet they offer reliable transportation, decent performance, and that special something that makes driving them genuinely enjoyable. They're not track weapons or drift missiles, but they're honest, engaging sports coupes that prove you don't need huge power numbers or exotic engineering to have fun behind the wheel. Finally, we need to discuss the Honda Prelude, specifically the 4th and 5th generation models with VTEC. The Prelude was Honda's front-wheel drive sport coupe that competed against cars like the Acura Integra, Toyota Celica, and Mitsubishi Eclipse, and in many ways it was the most sophisticated and refined of the entire segment. The later Preludes featured Honda's legendary VTEC technology that transformed the engine's character at high RPM, providing both low-end drivability and high-rev excitement, four-wheel steering systems that improved handling dynamics, incredibly precise manual transmissions that Honda is famous for, and styling that balanced sportness with sophistication. The Prelude was never the fastest car in its class, never the most powerful, and never the most extreme, but it was arguably the best, balanced, and most rewarding to drive day to day. The problem was that it got overshadowed by its cheaper sibling, the Integra, which offered similar performance in a lighter package, and by rear-wheel drive alternatives that purists preferred. Honda eventually discontinued the Prelude, and today it's largely forgotten except by die-hard Honda enthusiasts. But anyone who's spent time with a well-maintained fifth-generation Prelude knows it represents everything great about Honda's engineering philosophy: attention to detail, focus on the driving experience, and build quality that ensures these cars run forever with basic maintenance. These underrated JDM sports cars prove that chasing famous names and following hype isn't always the best path to driving enjoyment and automotive satisfaction. While everyone else fights over overpriced Supras and Skylines, these forgotten gems offer genuine performance, engaging dynamics, and that special JDM character for a fraction of the cost and attention.